So imagine your engineering team has just spent, I don't know, 3 years and maybe $8 million perfecting the microtolerances of this machined aerospace
Right.
component.
$8 million.
Right. It is an absolute masterpiece of modern manufacturing. I mean, it ships out of your climate control facility in pristine, totally flawless condition.
Completely perfect.
Exactly. And then 6 weeks later, it finally reaches the client across the ocean. The ground crew at the destination port, they crack open the doors of the shipping container, and your component is completely, just irreparably corroded.
Oh, man.
Yeah, rusted out. It's a total write-off. Your $8 million engineering triumph wasn't defeated by, like, corporate espionage or a rival company's superior tech.
Right, or even a hurricane.
Nope, not a catastrophic hurricane or a cargo ship going down in the Atlantic. It was defeated by a sweaty metal box.
It's just wild. It is the ultimate disconnect between, the brilliance of modern research and development and the brutal, honestly low-tech physical reality of global transit.
Yeah, totally.
You have this high-tech space-age hardware, and it is completely undone by what is essentially just basic indoor weather.
That's exactly it. The murder weapon in this multi-million-dollar true crime story is literally just humidity.
Just humidity.
Right. So, welcome to our deep dive into a massive global blind spot, one that's currently masquerading as a mundane paperwork issue.
Yeah, a really expensive paperwork issue.
For sure. So our mission today is to unpack this catastrophic thermodynamic event known in the industry as container rain. We are going to figure out how to stop this immense capital leakage.
And we're taking a really interesting angle on it today.
Yeah, we are. To do that, we're going to look at industrial logistics through a very specific aesthetic and conceptual lens. We're going to apply the design philosophy of Dieter Rams.
Which is honestly a brilliant framework for this problem. For those who might be familiar with industrial design, Rams is the legend behind the most iconic, functionally pure products of the 20th century.
Right, the Braun calculators and stuff.
Exactly. His entire philosophy boils down to a single principle, which is less but better. It's all about this extreme functional minimalism, high signal, zero visual noise.
I love that. Good design is as little design as possible. Stripping away the non-essentials so the product's function is, like, undeniably clear.
Exactly.
So we want to see how making logistics architecture so minimally aesthetic, so functionally clear and unique, can actually save millions of dollars in ruined enterprise hardware. And agricultural commodities, too.
Yeah, it applies to so much.
We want to make the protection so fundamentally logical that it's impossible for the industry to ignore.
And that requires a complete paradigm shift, really, because for decades, the industry has fundamentally misunderstood the problem.
How so?
Well, they've treated shipping as a geographical challenge. Like, how do we get a 20-foot equivalent unit, a TEU, from point A to point B over open water?
Right. Logistics 101.
Yeah, but it's not a geographical problem at all. It is a material science and engineering problem.
Okay, that makes sense.
The container is a closed ecosystem, and we have to understand the thermodynamic mechanics of that ecosystem before we can design a minimalist solution for it.
So let's get into the mechanics of that failure then. Let's unpack the sweaty metal box. Because when you hear the term container rain, I think the immediate visual for you, the listener, is probably a rusted out roof with a hole in it, right?
For sure. Like a leak letting in a thunderstorm.
Exactly. But that's not what's happening at all.
Not even close. The corrugated steel container is structurally intact. It is perfectly sealed against the outside elements, like the ocean spray and the external rain.
It's a closed system.
Right. The problem is entirely internal. It is a self-generated weather system, and it begins the exact moment the cargo is loaded.
Okay, walk me through that.
Think about a standard global route. A container is being packed in a port in Southeast Asia. Let's take Port Klang in Malaysia, which is a massive hub.
Huge port.
The ambient temperature on the loading dock there is incredibly high, and the relative humidity is just stifling.
So the ambient air you are trapping inside the box when you finally close the doors, it's already basically a tropical jungle.
Yes, but the ambient air is only a fraction of the problem. The real danger is the hidden moisture.
Hidden moisture.
Yeah, we have to look at the physical materials inside the container used to support the cargo. Specifically, we're talking about the wooden pallets, the dunnage, and the corrugated cardboard used for packaging.
The basics of shipping.
Exactly. Wood and cardboard are highly hygroscopic, which means at a cellular level they are designed to absorb and hold water.
But wait, if I'm a warehouse manager, I'm looking at those pallets and they look completely dry. They feel dry to the touch.
We feel dry because the water is trapped in the vascular structure of the timber. We're dealing with what's called equilibrium moisture content, or EMC.
EMC, okay.
Even timber that feels bone dry can have a moisture content of 15 to 20%, depending on the ambient humidity it was stored in.
Wow.
Yeah, a standard wooden shipping pallet can hold several liters of bound water deep within its fibers.
Several liters.
Yeah.
In just one pallet.
In just one pallet. Now, factor in the logistics. You load 20 of these pallets into the container, you lock the doors, the container is swung onto the deck of a cargo ship.
And then the sun comes up.
Exactly. The steel box sits on the deck, fully exposed to direct, unfiltered solar radiation over the open ocean.
That's basically an oven.
It is. The exterior steel acts as a massive thermal conductor. The internal temperature of that closed space spikes dramatically, easily pushing 50 or 60 degrees Celsius.
Wait, 60 Celsius? That's over 140 degrees Fahrenheit inside the box.
Right. And thermodynamics takes over.
Yeah.
As the temperature rises, the air's capacity to hold water increases.
Yep.
That massive heat energy literally drives the bound water out of the cellular walls of the wooden pallets and the cardboard.
So it's baking the water out of the wood.
Exactly. The moisture evaporates into the confined airspace. You have essentially created a hyperhumid, pressurized steam room.
Okay, so we have all this evaporated water suspended in the air, but evaporation alone doesn't ruin a machine aerospace part. I mean, it's just humid air at that point.
Right.
It's what happens when the temperature drops that actually causes the destruction.
Precisely. The ship sails out of the tropics and into the volatile expanse of the North Pacific. Or, frankly, simply the sun goes down.
Just nighttime.
Yeah, the ambient temperature over the ocean drops rapidly. The exterior steel of the container cools incredibly fast, bleeding off the heat into the night air. And this is where we breach the dew point.
The dew point, okay, just to be absolutely clear on the physics here for everyone, the dew point is the exact thermal threshold where the air can no longer hold all that suspended water vapor.
Exactly. Cold air cannot hold as much moisture as hot air. So the trapped, hyperhumid air inside the container comes into contact with the rapidly cooling steel ceiling.
And then it just gives up.
Right. The air temperature at that boundary layer drops below its dew point. The water vapor has to undergo a phase change. It condenses back into a liquid. It forms heavy, dense water droplets across the entire ceiling of the container. And gravity does the rest. It literally rains down onto the cargo.
And this isn't just like a quick morning dew either. This is a continuous cycle.
It is relentless because the next day the sun comes up, the temperature spikes, the fallen water evaporates back into the air, and the cycle repeats.
Over and over.
Day after day, night after night for a 20 or 30-day ocean voyage. It is a continuous closed-loop rainstorm.
That's wild to visualize. I have an analogy for this.
Yeah.
If you take a freezing cold can of soda out of the fridge on a hot summer day and set it on the patio, it instantly starts sweating.
Yes.
Water beads up on the outside of the aluminum because the hot, humid ambient air hits the cold surface and breaches the dew point.
That is the exact thermodynamic mechanism?
But with container rain, you have to reverse the perspective.
Yeah.
You, as the listener, have to imagine that you are the $8 million aerospace component.
Oh, I like this.
And you are trapped inside the soda can. The outside environment gets cold, the steel gets cold, and the inside of the can starts sweating all over you.
It's a terrifying thought.
Right. You are locked inside a self-contained weather system for a month.
That is a brilliantly terrifying way to visualize it. You are the cargo trapped in the sweating can.
Yeah.
Now, as complex as the global supply chain is, the physics we just discussed are incredibly straightforward. It's basically high school physics.
Very true.
But what makes this a real deep dive is the administrative fallout. The way multinational corporations handle this purely physical destruction is, well, incredibly convoluted.
And frankly, financially devastating.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the corporate reaction, the administrative surrender, as I like to call it.
It really is a surrender.
It is, because this is where the story shifts from a hard physics problem to a highly dysfunctional management problem. Because if the physics are this predictable, why isn't the industry fixing it?
Well, it's because of the massive disconnect between the executive suite and the ground-level reality.
How so?
Think about the modern logistics dashboard. In the boardroom, the VP of supply chain is looking at a beautiful software interface. The UI is clean. The shipment of aerospace parts is dispatched.
Everything looks perfect on the screen.
All right. The GPS tracker shows the ship moving steadily across the Pacific. The status light is glowing a reassuring green.
Right. The digital abstraction says everything is totally fine.
But the digital abstraction cannot measure a microclimate. The ship arrives, the dashboard pings delivered, but then you walk down to the actual loading dock,
The real world.
the ground level execution.
Yeah.
The receiver wearing canvas gloves grabs the heavy steel latch of the container. They break the customs seal, they pull open the doors, and before they even see the cargo, they are hit with the overwhelming smell of mildew and stagnant water.
Oh, that smell is unmistakable. So the green line on the dashboard instantly turns into $1 million night.
Exactly. The light spills into the container, and they're looking at a completely degraded inventory. Rusted metal, collapsed corrugated boxes, black mold growing up the sides of the pallets.
Disgusting.
It is a profound, undeniable failure of the system. And the daily friction this creates for logistics managers is immense.
This is where I really struggle with the corporate mindset. If I'm losing millions of dollars of product to a completely predictable physics equation, my first instinct is to re-engineer the box.
Naturally.
But the industry standard seems to be just accepting this capital leakage as the cost of doing business.
They do accept it. And they absorb the damage by triggering an endless, archaic cycle of paperwork. Instead of treating the root cause, they treat the symptom through insurance claims.
This is exhausting.
It is. The logistics manager now has to spend the next 6 months fighting with marine insurance adjusters. And this plunges us into one of the most frustrating legal traps in global shipping.
Yes.
The inherent vice clause. Specifically, Clause 4.4 in the Institute Cargo Clauses.
The inherent vice trap. Explain how this works mechanically, because from the outside, it sounds like the ultimate corporate loophole designed entirely so insurers never have to pay out.
Honestly, it is the ultimate defensive mechanism for marine underwriters. When a shipment arrives ruined by moisture, the logistics operator files a claim, assuming their comprehensive coverage will make them whole.
This is logical.
But the insurance adjuster sends an inspector, looks at the rusted metal or the moldy cargo, and invokes Clause 4.4, inherent vice.
Okay.
This clause explicitly states that the insurance policy does not cover the natural deterioration of goods or damage caused by the fundamental nature of the goods themselves.
Meaning the insurance company looks at the destruction and says, hey, organic things naturally degrade. Metal naturally rusts. It's not our fault your cargo acted like what it is.
Exactly. But they take it a step further. They will argue that the goods were shipped with excessive moisture content to begin with.
Oh, wow.
The adjuster will point to those wooden pallets we talked about earlier. They'll say, your factory packed the cargo on timber that was too wet. The EMC was too high.
So they blame the pallets.
Yes. They'll say, the moisture that destroyed your aerospace part came from your own pallets. The cargo essentially destroyed itself from the inside out. Therefore, the failure was an inherent vice of the cargo itself, not an external peril of the sea that we are obligated to cover.
Wow.
Oh.
So it instantly triggers a massive, unresolvable blame game. The carrier, like the shipping line, blames the factory, saying, you packed it wet.
Right.
And then the factory turns around and blames the carrier, saying, no, we packed it dry, your ship's ventilation schedule was terrible, and you didn't manage the airflow in the hold.
Exactly.
And the poor logistics manager is just standing in the middle, holding a rejected shipment worth millions, with absolutely nobody willing to write a check.
Which is exactly why trying to out-argue bad physics with better paperwork is a guaranteed way to lose your company's capital. This is where we really must push back on the entire industry's standard operating procedure.
I agree completely.
This is not a failure of logistics routing. It is not a failure of insurance negotiation. This is a failure of architectural design.
Okay, expand on that. When you say architectural design, I usually think of buildings. What does architecture mean in the context of a 20-foot steel shipping container?
Well, it means we have to stop treating the container as just a box that moves through space. The container is a highly dynamic environment. We are designing a microclimate.
Oh, I see.
If your hardware is sweating to death, your environmental architecture failed, period. This brings us directly back to our Dieter Rams aesthetic lens.
Right. Less but better.
We need a solution that isn't just more tape, more plastic, or more legal clauses. We need restorative engineering.
Restorative engineering. I really like that framing. Deploying physical and digital architecture to restore safety, control, and functional clarity to the supply chain.
Yes, we take absolute control of the microclimate. And if we look at this through the philosophy of less but better, the fix isn't about adding complexity to the loading process.
No, it should be simple.
It's about a very precise, stripped-down, three-tier defense mechanism.
All right, let's walk through this three-tiered minimalist approach. Let's start with step one, active desiccation. Now, I think most people, when they think of keeping things dry, they immediately picture those little white packets that say, "Do not eat," that fall out of new shoe boxes.
Silica gel.
Yeah, silica gel.
Which is exactly what procurement teams across the globe buy in massive industrial bulk quantities to throw inside shipping containers.
Wait, if the stakes are this high, we're talking millions of dollars in aerospace components, why are procurement teams obsessed with standard silica gel if it fundamentally fails in maritime shipping?
They are obsessed with it because of spreadsheet optics.
Spreadsheet optics.
Silica gel is incredibly cheap. Buying it saves the procurement team a fraction of a cent on the unit cost of packaging. It makes their quarterly budget look highly efficient.
Ah, so it's a cost-saving illusion.
Exactly. But chemically, structurally, silica gel is entirely unsuited for the extremes of ocean transit.
What's the actual chemical failure point? Why doesn't it work?
It comes down to the difference between adsorption with a D and absorption. Silica gel works through physisorption.
It's absorption.
It has a highly porous microscopic structure, and water molecules just stick to the surface of those pores. It basically acts as a temporary buffer.
Okay, that sounds
Somewhat helpful. But here's the critical thermodynamic failure. The bond is weak. When the temperature inside that container spikes above 40 degrees Celsius, which we already established happens every single day under solar radiation, the silica gel reaches its thermal threshold.
And what happens?
The heat energy breaks the physical bonds, and the silica actually releases the moisture back into the air.
You've got to be kidding me. So it basically acts like a sponge that literally wrings itself out every afternoon when the sun gets hot.
It completely surrenders. It catches the water at night and throws it back into the enclosed atmosphere during the day, right in time for the temperature to drop and cause container rain all over again.
That's insane.
It is worse than useless. It creates a false sense of security.
So what is the functionally minimalist alternative? What is the signal cutting through that noise?
The first step of our architecture is to abandon silica entirely. We have to switch to calcium chloride desiccants.
Calcium chloride.
Solutions engineered specifically for extreme environments like dry desiccants. Calcium chloride is a completely different chemical beast. It operates through chemisorption and deliquescence.
Okay, break that down for me. What does deliquescence mean in this context?
It means it aggressively pulls moisture from the air, and instead of just holding it loosely in a porous structure like silica, it chemically reacts with it.
A chemical reaction.
It traps the water molecules and undergoes a state change. It actually transforms the airborne moisture into a highly viscous liquid or a solid gel, which is trapped inside a one-way microporous membrane.
So it forces a permanent chemical state change. Once the water is caught, it cannot escape, regardless of the temperature spike.
Exactly. It does not surrender to thermal fluctuations. By continuously and permanently stripping moisture out of the air, the calcium chloride actively forces the relative humidity inside the container permanently below the dew point.
Which solves the problem entirely.
Right. It guarantees that condensation physically cannot form on the steel ceiling.
That is step one. Active, aggressive desiccation. Now, step two of this defense is what the industry calls engineered isolation. And this is where the Dieter Rams aesthetic really snaps into focus for me.
It really does.
We're talking about MIL-PRF 131 moisture barrier bags.
The military nomenclature sounds complex, but the physical reality is profoundly simple, beautiful, and effective. We have to look at what the industry currently does to isolate cargo.
Which is what?
They wrap it in standard polyethylene plastic wrap. Shrink wrap.
Right, you see those massive pallets wrapped tightly in clear plastic. It looks pretty secure.
It looks secure, but it is a total illusion. Standard polyethylene plastic is actually porous to water vapor at a microscopic level. It has a high moisture vapor transmission rate, or MVTR.
Really? Yeah, water molecules literally pass right through the molecular structure of the plastic over a 30-day voyage. It is visual noise without any functional signal.
So what makes the MIL-PRF 131 barrier different? Why does it work?
It is a multi-layered, military-grade foil barrier material. It incorporates a layer of heavy aluminum foil laminated to specialized polymers.
Oh, foil.
Yes. Aluminum has an MVTR of absolute zero. No water vapor can pass through a solid metal barrier. You place your high-value asset inside this massive foil envelope, and you vacuum seal it. You extract the ambient air entirely.
I am picturing this visually, and it is incredibly striking from a design perspective. You have this dark, dirty, chaotic, corrugated steel container.
Yeah.
And sitting perfectly in the middle of it, strapped to a pallet, is this pure silver vacuum-sealed geometric shape. It is a completely impenetrable boundary. It really is the purest expression of engineered minimalism. It creates a hard, undeniable physical line separating the critical asset from the chaotic environment of the container. It is visually unique, and it is effectively good-looking because its function is absolute. Nothing gets in.
Which brings us to the final piece of the architecture. Step 3, continuous telemetry.
The digital aspect.
Right. We have the chemical trap with the calcium chloride. We have the absolute physical barrier with the silver foil bag. Now we introduce the digital truth teller, the $40 Bluetooth IoT data logger.
You cannot manage what you do not measure. And crucially, in the world of logistics and insurance, you cannot defend what you cannot prove.
Very true.
This is where we close the loop. You take a tiny, inexpensive IoT sensor, a Bluetooth Low Energy, or BLE, environmental logger, and you mount one on the internal wall of the steel container.
Okay.
And then you put a second one inside the MIL PRF 131 barrier bag right next to the critical asset before you vacuum seal it.
Okay, I actually have to push back here for a second. We're putting a Bluetooth transmitter inside a solid aluminum foil bag, which is itself inside a massive corrugated steel box.
Yeah, we are.
That is essentially a double Faraday cage. How does the math work on that signal penetrating out?
Well, it doesn't need to transmit out during the voyage. That's the beauty of it. It's a logger, not a real-time cellular tracker.
Oh, I see.
While the ship is in the middle of the Pacific, the logger is simply writing data to its internal flash memory. It is continuously tracking the exact temperature and relative humidity and calculating the precise dew point minute by minute across the entire 30-day voyage.
Just quietly taking notes.
Exactly. It is creating an immutable, cryptographically secure ledger of the physical reality inside that box and inside that bag. It waits until the doors are opened at the destination to dump its payload to a local receiver.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Right.
So we have this beautifully simple, highly functional three-tiered system. Chemical desiccation, physical isolation, digital telemetry.
Less, but better.
Now, I want to look at how this plays out across the global economy. Because this single thermodynamic event, a drop in temperature causing a dew point breach, creates wildly different chemical and structural failures depending on what exactly is inside the box.
And this is where we clearly see that a one-size-fits-all shipping approach is an absolute disaster. We need to examine industry-specific moisture warfare. The payload dictates the protocol.
Let's start with heavy machinery and aerospace, which we touched on with our $8 million component. For them, it is all about absolute, uncompromising isolation. Let's say you have an engine block, or maybe a highly machined turbine blade for a power plant. The moisture from container rain causes surface oxidation. Rust.
But it's not just cosmetic rust. These components are machined to tolerances of thousandths of an inch.
Right.
If a turbine blade develops even microscopic pitting from surface oxidation, the aerodynamic profile is altered. When that blade is installed and spun up to 10,000 RPMs under massive thermal stress, that microscopic pit becomes a stress fracture.
And then what?
It leads to catastrophic thermodynamic failure of the turbine. The entire $1 million assembly can tear itself apart because of a few drops of water in a shipping container. For machinery, the failure is deeply structural and mechanical.
It's terrifying to think about. But contrast that with the pharmaceutical industry. The physical cargo looks vastly different, and the failure state is completely different. They aren't shipping giant chunks of steel.
Right. For pharma, they're shipping millions of tiny pills or vials. They aren't worried about rust. They are worried about API stability.
API.
The active pharmaceutical ingredient.
Okay, explain that. How does water in the air destroy a pill that's already sitting in a blister pack?
Many pharmaceutical compounds are highly sensitive to moisture degradation. Water molecules can penetrate standard secondary packaging.
Right.
Once humidity reaches the pill, it can trigger hydrolysis, literally breaking down the chemical bonds of the active ingredient. It reduces the product's therapeutic potency.
Yeah.
Furthermore, it damages the physical integrity of the blister packaging itself, causing the foil backings to delaminate.
And in the pharmaceutical world, you aren't just dealing with a disappointed client who rejects a rusty part. You are dealing with federal regulators.
Yeah.
The FDA, the EMA in Europe.
Exactly. Strict regulatory compliance is the name of the game. If the ambient humidity data shows a spike, or if there is any evidence of moisture ingress, the shelf life is legally compromised.
You can't use it.
You can't just wipe the water off and sell it. The entire batch, potentially tens of billions of dollars of medicine must be incinerated.
Which is exactly why the documentation provided by these minimalist solutions is so critical.
Yeah.
Our analysis highlights how utilizing specific, certified desiccant solutions like the advanced calcium chloride from Drycon provides a paper trail.
It's invaluable.
You don't just get the chemical, you get certificates of analysis or COAs and strict material specifications.
That is a massive operational advantage that logistics managers often overlook. For highly regulated export markets like pharmaceuticals, proving compliance before the shipment even leaves is just as important as the physical protection itself.
Because it's all about the paperwork for the regulators.
Yes. Having certified materials vastly simplifies that incredibly complex regulatory documentation. The auditor sees the Drycon COA, they see the aisle spec barrier certification, and the compliance check is cleared.
Okay, so we have the mechanical failure of heavy machinery and the chemical degradation of pharma. But where this thermodynamic warfare gets really intense and frankly fascinating is in agricultural commodities.
The biological element.
Right. This is the perishable risk. We have incredible data on Malaysia's massive export market to illustrate how biologically active cargo behaves.
Agricultural exports are the ultimate test case for microclimate control because they are inherently biologically active, they're organic, and they desperately want to interact with the moisture in the air.
Let's look at the specifics. Malaysia exports billions of dollars in these commodities. Take natural rubber, specifically standard Malaysian rubber, grades like SMR20. It's shipped in these massive, dense bales. If container condensation drips onto SMR20 during a 25-day transit from Port Klang to Rotterdam, what happens?
The rubber basically acts like a massive biological sponge. It absorbs the moisture directly into its matrix. And because rubber naturally contains trace proteins and sugars, the addition of water creates the perfect petri dish.
Yuck.
The bale grows widespread surface mold, black, green, white mold covering tons and tons of product.
And I'm assuming moldy rubber doesn't sell well.
It is commercially unmarketable. To salvage it, the buyer has to institute a costly remediation process. They have to physically scrub the bales, wash them, and re-dry them in industrial ovens.
That sounds incredibly expensive.
It is, and this process completely downgrades the rubber's quality, elasticity, and value. The profit margin is entirely wiped out.
Wow. Then you have cocoa butter. This one completely blew my mind.
Oh, this is a great example.
Cocoa butter is essential for high-end chocolate, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, but it has a melting point of roughly 34 degrees Celsius.
Which is only about 93 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right, which is absolutely nothing inside a steel box under the sun.
Yeah.
93 degrees is a cool morning in a shipping container.
Exactly.
If a container of cocoa butter is stowed on the top tier of a ship sailing through the Red Sea or the Middle East in the summer, the internal temperature can easily blow past 60 degrees Celsius.
The thermal dynamics here are just disastrous. The cocoa butter completely melts into a liquid pool inside its packaging. But the real damage actually happens when the ship moves into cooler waters and the liquid resolidifies.
Right, because it doesn't just freeze back into perfect cocoa butter, does it?
Oh, it undergoes polymorphic crystallization.
Okay, that sounds bad.
The lipid structures form differently depending on the rate of cooling. When it resolidifies in a fluctuating container environment, it develops what the industry calls fat bloom.
Fat bloom.
It forms these highly unstable, white, chalky crystals on the surface. It completely loses its temper characteristics, its smooth texture, and precise melting profile. It is ruined for premium chocolate production and is relegated to low-grade industrial use at a massive loss.
It's a complete structural breakdown. And finally, consider massive timber shipments. Sawn timber, plywood, high-end furniture. Timber faces a unique biological threat: infestation.
Wood-boring insects. Termites, specific beetle larvae. The insects themselves might actually be dormant in the wood when it's loaded.
Creepy.
But if moisture levels in the container are high and the temperature is warm, it creates the perfect breeding incubator. The eggs hatch.
So if a shipment of high-end furniture arrives at a highly regulated port, say Hamburg in Germany or Yokohama in Japan, and the quarantine authorities do a spot check and find live insect larvae crawling on the wood, what happens?
It triggers an immediate non-negotiable quarantine rejection. The entire shipment is seized.
Seized, just like that.
Just like that. It might be chemically fumigated at exorbitant cost to the seller, or worse, the authorities will order the complete destruction of the cargo via incineration at the destination port. And all of that is billed back to the logistics operator.
Which brings up a really critical legal point about international shipping terms, or Incoterms, and what the industry calls the moisture gap.
Right, the Incoterms.
Because a lot of people listening might be thinking, well, if my cocoa butter melts or my rubber gets moldy, I have insurance. But that depends entirely on the three-letter acronym on your contract.
Exactly. This is where logistics managers often walk blindly into a massive financial trap without even realizing it. Many processed agricultural goods, like rubber products, are traditionally sold on CIF terms. CIF stands for cost, insurance, and freight.
Okay, break that down for me. What does CIF actually mean for the person selling and shipping the goods?
Under CIF rules, the seller is legally obligated to arrange the freight and obtain marine insurance for the buyer. But, and this is the massive million-dollar catch, the Incoterms only require the seller to obtain the absolute minimum level of coverage.
The bare minimum.
Yes. In the insurance world, this is known as Institute Cargo Clauses, C. ICC.
Let me guess. Based on the theme of this deep dive, ICC does not cover a sweaty metal box.
It absolutely does not. ICC is essentially catastrophe insurance. It covers major external perils, the ship sinking, a fire in the hold, the ship colliding with a reef.
Big disasters.
Right. It explicitly excludes damage from moisture, condensation, changing temperatures, and contamination.
That is a staggering blind spot. You are the logistics manager. You look at the contract that says insurance, you check the box, and you think you are protected.
But you're not.
You are completely exposed to the single most common cause of cargo damage on the planet.
Which is why expert logistics managers must actively negotiate and demand ICCA coverage. ICCA is all risks protection. It covers everything that isn't specifically excluded, which means it generally covers moisture damage from container condensation.
But wait a minute. Even if I pay the premium and get the gold standard ICCA coverage, we are right back to that inherent vice trap, clause 4.4, right?
Yes, we are.
I file my claim for moldy rubber, and the insurer still looks at it and says, nope, your rubber was too wet when you loaded it. Inherent vice. Claim denied.
You've hit the nail on the head. Insurance alone cannot fix the problem. And this is exactly how we connect the regulatory paperwork back to our restorative engineering and minimalist design.
Okay, how so?
You have to build a fortress of proof. If you use certified documented processes, for example, obtaining a certified fumigation certificate from an independent third party, or an ISPM heat treatment certificate for your timber pallets, you have undeniable documentary proof that the cargo was clean, dry, and pest-free at the origin port.
Ah, so you defeat the inherent vice argument before the ship even leaves the loading dock.
You do. You synthesize the physical thermodynamic protection of the calcium chloride and the IML-spec barrier bags with the regulatory protection of the certificates. You are designing a system where failure is impossible to attribute to your negligence.
Okay, so let's play this out. Let's say the absolute worst happens. You've done everything perfectly. You've deployed the dry desiccants. You've vacuum sealed your asset in the MIL PRF 131 bag. You have the ISPM 15 certificates, and you have the IoT sensor running inside the bag.
You're fully locked down.
Right. The ship sails, it hits massive weather, the container is physically breached by a rogue wave, water floods in, and against all odds, the exterior container failed so catastrophically that the cargo is damaged.
Now we enter the final battle, forcing the adjuster to pay.
This is the data-driven claim process. How do we take that $40 Bluetooth sensor we talked about earlier and turn it into a weapon against the insurance company's legal team?
We use the power of hard, immutable data to fundamentally shift the balance of power in arbitration. The logistics operator's exact playbook for winning a claim relies entirely on the continuous telemetry we established in Step 3 of our architecture.
So Step 1 of the playbook, as we covered, is deploying that Bluetooth Low Energy, or BLE, environmental sensor inside the container, and crucially, a second one inside the barrier bag.
Step 2 happens the moment the container arrives at the destination dock. As soon as those steel doors open, the Faraday cage effect is broken.
The signal gets out.
The BLE sensor immediately pings the local low-power network, often just a gateway receiver installed on the loading dock, or even an app on the receiver's smartphone. It intercepts the JSON payload.
Let's clarify the JSON payload. For the logistics folks listening who aren't software engineers, what exactly are they intercepting?
JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's simply a lightweight, highly structured data format, but practically it is a massive, chronologically perfect spreadsheet.
Full of data.
It contains thousands of data points, exact timestamps, internal temperature readings, relative humidity percentages.
Step 3 is the absolute magic of this system. You take that payload and you map the exact moment the dew point breached the cargo tolerance. You don't just file a claim and vaguely say the cargo got wet somewhere over the ocean.
No, you eliminate all ambiguity. You look at the graph and you say, on day 14 of the voyage at 2:14 p.m. UTC, while the vessel was navigating a storm system in the North Pacific, the external temperature dropped 42 degrees in 2 hours.
Very specific.
The internal humidity spiked, the dew point was breached, and we can see exactly when the microclimate failed.
Step 4. You hand this immutable minute-by-minute ledger to your logistics lead.
And step 5, you present this visual data graph to the insurance adjuster.
And the conversation is just over.
It completely neuters their defense.
It's the ultimate dash cam analogy.
It really is.
Think about it. If you get into a car crash at a busy intersection, and it's just your word against the other drivers, the insurance company is going to drag it out for months. He said, she said.
Oh, absolutely. They'll try to find shared fault to lower the payout.
Right. But if you have a 4K dash cam mounted on your windshield that clearly shows the other driver running a solid red light and T-boning you, well, there is no argument. The adjuster looks at the tape and writes the check.
That is a perfect parallel. The IoT sensor is the 4K dash cam for your cargo. By having one sensor inside the container and one inside the MIL PRF-131 bag, you prove two things simultaneously.
Which are?
First, you prove that your internal microclimate, your burial bag, held perfectly until an extreme external event occurred. Second, you prove that the external container failed due to massive documented transit conditions.
Unbeatable proof.
It definitively, mathematically disproves the inherent vice defense. They cannot blame your factory when you have minute-by-minute data proving otherwise.
It's beautiful. It's so clean and undeniable. And let's talk about the long-term ROI of this strategy. Because investing in this level of moisture protection, the advanced calcium chloride, the specialized barrier bags, the digital sensors, it obviously requires a higher upfront capital investment than buying a bucket of useless silica gel and some plastic wrap.
Yes, there is an upfront cost.
How does this impact the company's long-term capital leakage?
It drastically reduces long-term shipment insurance costs. You have to look at it from the underwriter's perspective. Marine insurance companies analyze risk via loss ratios.
Okay.
If your company is constantly filing claims for rusted hardware, degraded pharma APIs, or moldy cocoa beans, your loss ratio is terrible. The insurer is going to drastically hike your premiums, or worse, they will simply refuse to underwrite your high-value shipments entirely.
You become basically uninsurable.
Exactly. But if you implement this active isolation protocol, you stop the preventable losses entirely. You end the cycle of rejected shipments.
And over time, you're generating thousands of these JSON payloads, proving your shipments arrive safely.
Yes. You build a documented, data-backed history of safe transit. You take 3 years of data to your underwriter and prove to them that you have effectively eliminated the moisture variable from your supply chain.
That's a strong negotiating position.
That documented history translates directly into significantly lower future premiums, lower deductibles, and better coverage terms. The upfront cost of the barrier bag pays for itself tenfold in reduced insurance friction. You've turned a systemic, chaotic loss into a controlled, optimized, predictable process.
So we have the philosophical framework, we understand the physics and chemistry, and we have the corporate insurance strategy. But none of this matters if it fails on the ground.
No, it doesn't.
Which brings us to execution and implementation. We need to bring this high-level Dieter Rams-inspired strategy down to the person wearing the canvas gloves, standing on the concrete loading dock at 6:00 a.m.
This is perhaps the most critical step of all, implementation. A brilliant architecture is completely useless if the builder ignores the blueprint. How do we empower the warehouse staff to identify potential condensation risks before the container doors are ever closed?
Well, our analysis provides some highly practical operational tips. First, the staff needs to actively examine the wooden pallets, not just assume they are safe.
Right. They need to be trained to look for visual and physical cues of high EMC. Are the pallets visibly damp? Does the wood feel unusually heavy for its size?
Good point.
Have these pallets been sitting outside in the rain in the staging area before being brought into the warehouse? If the wood is wet, you reject the pallet, period.
Second, they must inspect the corrugated steel container itself before loading anything.
Yeah.
You don't just blindly push the forklift in. Look for existing dampness on the floorboards. Look for structural flaws.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Are the rubber gaskets around the doors cracked or degraded by salt water? If you stand inside the container and close the doors, can you see pinholes of daylight in the ceiling?
Because if you can see daylight, water vapor is getting in. And third, they must ensure the cargo's own moisture content is within specification before sealing it in the barrier bag.
Very important.
If you are packing bags of coffee beans or organic materials that haven't been properly dried in the facility, you are loading a ticking time bomb. It doesn't matter how good your calcium chloride is if you seal a massive source of water inside the microclimate with the product.
So to make this actionable for a logistics team, we need a standard operating procedure. We can synthesize a specific 4-step daily checklist for loading dock teams to prevent immediate moisture damage. And this needs to become muscle memory for the crew.
Let's lay it out chronologically. Step 1. Verify container cleanliness. The crew must sweep and visually inspect the interior. This prevents cross-contamination from whatever was shipped in that box previously.
What if the last shipment was wet?
Exactly. If the last shipment was wet agricultural goods, the wooden floorboards of the container might still be soaked.
Step 2. Confirm the placement and quantity of the active desiccant. And this is crucial. Make sure the calcium chloride poles are actually hung from the integrated lashing rings near the ceiling, not just tossed lazily onto the floor between the pallets.
Excellent point. Airflow is critical for desiccants. They need to be high up to capture the rising humidity. Step 3. Verify the vacuum seal on the MIL PRF 131 barrier bags.
How do they do that?
This is a rigorous visual and physical inspection by the dock supervisor to ensure the foil bag is sucked tight against the asset, there are no punctures or tears from the forklift tines, and the heat seal is perfectly uniform.
And finally, step 4. Activate and securely mount the IoT data logger. It sounds incredibly basic, but you have to actually turn the device on and verify it's blinking before you lock the doors.
It does sound basic, but operationalizing that exact 4-step checklist transforms the loading process from a passive chore into an active defense protocol.
I really love this observation. By implementing this protocol, you are fundamentally empowering the frontline worker. The person on the dock is no longer just a laborer throwing boxes into a bigger box to meet a quota.
They are so much more than that.
They are the final line of defense for millions of dollars of hardware. They are executing a precise architectural protocol. They are the ones actually building the DRAM's aesthetic in the real world.
They are the architects of the microclimate. If they fail, the entire system fails. But we also have to be realistic here.
In what way?
Overhauling a massive global logistics operation is daunting. You can't just walk into a supply chain director's office on a Tuesday and tell them to rip out their entire standard operating procedure, fire their silica gel vendor, and buy military-grade foil for 10,000 shipments.
Right. The friction of change in a legacy corporation is massive. People get defensive. So how do they adopt these active climate isolation protocols without completely overwhelming their daily operations and triggering a mutiny from the procurement team?
You use a highly targeted, phased implementation plan. You prove the concept before you scale it. And the most brilliant, low-friction starting point is what we call the 48-hour validation signal.
The 48-hour validation signal. How does that work mechanically? What is the pitch?
The pitch to the C-suite is this. You don't change the packaging on day one. You don't buy the expensive barrier bags. You don't even switch the desiccants yet.
Okay, so what do you do?
On the very next outbound container heading across the ocean, you change absolutely nothing about your legacy process except for one tiny addition. You hide a single $40 BLE environmental sensor inside the shipment.
You just send a spy into the box.
Exactly. You let the cargo ship normally with all its flaws and cheap silica gel, and when it arrives at the destination port, before anyone even files a claim, you pull the data payload.
And what does that data reveal to the executives?
It reveals the terrifying hidden physical reality of their transit route. It will show the VP of supply chain exactly how high the humidity spiked. It will show them the exact moment the temperature dropped, the dew point was breached, and it started raining inside their container onto their million-dollar asset.
You make the invisible visible, you bring the blind spot right into the light.
Yes, you use that undeniable, objective baseline data to justify the transition. Once the executive team sees the hard graph showing their $8 million aerospace components sitting in 98% relative humidity for 2 weeks straight, getting budget approval for MIL PRF 131 barrier bags and active calcium chloride desiccants goes from being an uphill battle to an absolute urgent necessity.
Wow. Okay, let's zoom out and recap this incredible journey because we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the fundamental thermodynamic problem, the sweaty metal box, where hidden moisture in wooden pallets, massive solar radiation, and rapidly dropping ocean temperatures conspire to cause devastating container rain.
And we saw how the logistics industry's default response was just administrative surrender, accepting the massive capital loss, writing it off, and fighting losing battles with adjusters over inherent vice insurance clauses.
We then completely reframed the problem. We applied the Dieter Rams' design philosophy of extreme functional minimalism. We introduced restorative engineering.
Right? Utilizing active calcium chloride desiccants to permanently capture and trap moisture via deliquescence. Utilizing visually striking, impenetrable MIL-PRF 131 vacuum-sealed bags for pure physical isolation. And deploying $40 IoT sensors for continuous, unblinking telemetry.
We explored how the single drop in temperature creates wildly unique failures across different industries, from structural pitting in aerospace parts to chemical degradation of pharma APIs to the polymorphic crystal failure of cocoa butter and the biological infestation of timber.
And finally, we brought it all down to the ground-level execution, using JSON data payloads to force marine insurance adjusters to pay claims instantly, and empowering loading dock workers with a strict daily checklist to guarantee the integrity of the packaging architecture. The core takeaway here is that global shipping is absolutely not about geography.
No, it is entirely about mastering and controlling microclimates. It is about intentional, minimalist design.
We just spent over an hour exploring how an entire, highly advanced global industry simply accepted millions of dollars in losses as normal just because the problem happened inside a closed, dark box in the middle of the ocean.
They accepted the unacceptable because the mechanism of failure was out of sight and therefore completely out of mind.
Exactly. So here's a final thought to mull over. What other massive systemic failures in your own industry or even in your daily work are you blindly accepting as just the cost of doing business simply because the root cause is slightly out of sight?
If you bring that root cause into the light and apply functional clarity, you might find the fix is far simpler and far more elegant than you ever imagined.
Less, but better.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.